Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Decisive Edge interview series, where Jewish women founders and CEOs tell the truth about how their Judaic heritage, values, and family traditions have influenced how they lead and how their lineage shaped the way they think, the way they decide, and the way they show up in rooms that weren't always built for them. I am here to reveal and talk about the wisdom that was passed down through the generations, those stories that almost stopped us and the ones that saved us, including those that ignited a fire within, and each of us has been our own phoenix rising. These are intended to be raw and honest conversations about generational influence, legacy, and the challenges and strengths that come from knowing exactly who you are. And so I want to invite everybody today to welcome my dear, dear friend, Marlo Lyons, to this series. Hello, Marlo. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me, Wendy. I'm so excited to be here and just talk about this topic.
I know, me too. And you were one of the first I asked because I was like, oh my God, because we talk so much about our families and how our family history and heritage have influenced a lot of the roles that we play in our lives. And so let me share a little bit more with everybody today around why you get to be in that seat today across from me. So Marlo has spent years being the most capable person in the room and the last one to be credited for it. She managed high stakes production risk at NBC and Viacom. She's advised C-suite leaders at companies like Roku and Intuitive Surgical, and has built one of the most respected executive coaching practices in the country. She's a licensed attorney, a certified HR executive, and an award-winning author. But today, we're not here to talk about her credentials. We're here to talk about what it took to stop waiting for someone else to hand her permission to use them. So, Marlo, are you ready to dive in?
Let's dive in.
Let's
Let's do
do
it.
it. Okay, great. So I would love for you to just kind of set the stage. Like, let's go back to Marlo as a little girl. What did it feel like? And what was it like growing up in your home? And I ask that from the lens of being Jewish. What did that feel like? What were the conversations happening? What were you observing? Take us back.
Well, I would say it was loud. I don't know a Jewish household that's not loud.
Yes.
Ours was especially loud. Everybody was loud, especially around the dinner table, right? But what's interesting, I tried to think back on that because you said, hey, we're going to dive into your childhood a little bit. And I said, and I thought about it and I'm like, God, being Jewish wasn't loud in our house. It was kind of quiet. Like we didn't really celebrate Shabbat at home. And we only really went to synagogue on the high holidays. And we went to a conservative synagogue, but we just didn't really practice. And I went to Hebrew school up through my bat mitzvah, and then I was done. And I just kind of understood that we were Jewish. I participated in BBYO. I was in a youth organization. I loved that because there I was really popular. Where in high school and in junior high, I was not so much. And so I had my own little place to be with people that were like me. But being Jewish really wasn't talked about much in the home. It was really just understood. And I think it kind of showed up in how you present yourself. It meant being strong, being responsible, saving money, getting educated, getting a job. But what it wasn't really discussed so much.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like, I can relate to that in a lot of ways. And I think that, our subconscious was learning things at that time, right? We grew up very similarly, although, I was not bat mitzvahed. My
Mm,
grandparents were Orthodox, so my sister and I actually did
wow.
not have bat mitzvahs. That was not something
No.
that we were encouraged, I'll say, to participate in. But one of the things that I know that you talk a lot about is, your, in how you have, or I should say, the trajectory of your career. I'm trying to think of the word. The trajectory of your career was really rooted around you being silent in the background, which, sort of plays into the theme of what you just said was going
Yeah.
on in your house. So I'd love for you to share more about that. I mean, what would you say
Yeah.
you were learning at the time around, people's needs, or what were you observing around, where your needs fit into everybody else's?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, my parents were boomers slash bordering that silent generation. So children were seen, but they weren't heard. That's just who we were, right? We were expected to be quiet. We were expected to be well behaved. We were expected to sit in a seat for a Passover Seder for 4 hours
Course.
at times and not move. And so I think, what that taught me was, you know, not only controlling my own emotions or maybe not even understanding my emotions back then, but it also taught me to be really independent. I mean, I remember when I was in like junior high, even, I would go for a bike ride for like 8 hours. I would just disappear. And these were the times of no cell phones, no communication, no helmet,
Right. Just be
Walkman
back
in my,
before the sun goes down.
oh yeah, Walkman in my back pocket, headphones on my ears, come home when the streetlights came on, right?
Right.
And being that independent, I think, is what really informed my career because my first career was being a TV news reporter. And I became a TV news reporter really because my father and I would watch Dan Rather and then Connie Chung in the evening, and he would say, well, you could do that. You ask a lot of questions. And because I was a really curious kid. And
Right.
so I became a TV news reporter and I moved to cities where I didn't know a soul. And I just figured it out. I did that over and over. I mean, I was in Oregon, Indiana, Ohio, Connecticut, Oklahoma. And I just found a place to live. I moved in. I dealt with vendors like moving trucks. I went to the movies by myself. I went to dinner by myself. I made friends. And so I would say it was really about just being independent. And I became independent probably from their parenting styles. Parents didn't hover back then. Parents were just like, all right, see ya, and you just went and did your thing on a Saturday.
Yeah.
But that independence ran through my whole career. It absolutely did. I think whenever I want something done, I just always think, oh, do it yourself, right?
Right.
Don't hire anybody, just do it yourself. It's the reason why I don't have a VA. I probably should have a virtual assistant at this point, and I don't. I do all the paperwork myself. I do all the billing myself. I probably shouldn't, but I do. I don't really wait for anybody to rescue me or to fix something. Now, I am married, so there are times where, hey, the dog peed on the floor and I don't want to go pick it up, so I will scream for my husband to go do it. But when he's absolutely, but when he's out of town, there's a lots of things I go back to, hey, I can do this. I got this. I can figure this out, And I do,
Yeah.
no matter what it is, but no matter what's going wrong in the house or whatever the case may be. So I think you could just own things. Like I just own things and I've been doing that my whole life. So I think it's that independence piece and I think it kind of played out through most of my career.
Yeah, and I'm curious to kind of go in a little bit deeper on that. And, here's my intuition, flying into our conversation today that I'm curious about is, you know, how did that sense of independence, though, did it ever make you feel like you were alone? Was there something in that where you sort of created a new narrative for yourself that perhaps, wasn't necessarily spoken out loud, but it was something that was just communicated subconsciously that you took into your subconscious?
I think I definitely think I had some loneliness for sure. And I don't think my parents meant that. I mean, my sister was quite ill when I was little. And so a lot of their attention went there. And in that scenario, I kind of had to be independent. I kind of had to do my own thing. And I even lived with my neighbor for a period of time, who's my best friend. And, I just kind of did what I had to do, more or less. I don't think I think I definitely was conditioned to be independent from that. And I definitely was lonely at times, but I don't think back then I knew I was lonely. I think I can look at that as a much older adult now and be like, oh, yeah, you were lonely. Oh, yeah,
Right.
you couldn't really have feelings back then because nobody had time to deal with those. So I do think that there were pieces that I've uncovered, at this point in my life, much later, but I don't think as
Hmm.
a child I necessarily noticed that. I was bullied as a kid as well. I was overweight, and I always thought I was being bullied for being overweight. I was probably being bullied because I butt into people's conversations and I inserted myself where I didn't belong. right? I was kind of a gregarious, like outgoing child. I think a lot of that, though, was me masking and just kind of putting on a show, right?
Right,
And
right,
trying to get maybe the attention that I wasn't getting.
right.
So, but I've unpacked a lot of that, and I don't know if the word is loneliness as much as probably misunderstood. I think it's more
Okay.
misunderstood.
And how did that play out for you in your later years and sort of um, you know, sort of as an undercurrent, I will say, around, going into journalism, right? You were in front of the camera. So how, kind of take me back to that and sort of how I mean, essentially, like, would you say that you use the microphone as a way for people to hear you, to start listening?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I was never comfortable being on camera. I look at my old reports and I'm like, oh, you look pretty good there. But back when I was doing it, I love storytelling and I
Mhm.
love writing. But the being on camera part kind of goes back to that independent of, hey, I did all this work, I want to present it, right? And
Yeah,
if I did it, I want to show it. Because, the producer doesn't show up on camera. You don't really know the producer who did the writing or whatever. And so I did it all myself.
right.
And then I wanted to be on camera to do that. I think there was also probably trying to prove something, right? Prove something to the
Of
bullies, like, look at
course,
me. Hey, I'm on
of
camera,
course,
right?
of
There was probably
course.
something there. Um, but eventually I realized like I didn't love being on camera. And it's so funny because today I'll shoot social media stuff and to this day I still hate being on camera. I don't listen to any of my podcasts after they're edited. I don't watch myself after I've cut a reel on something. I still can't do it. I don't love it. But I love the writing and I love the thought leadership and I have a lot to say. So I want people to know what I have to say. And so,
Yeah,
so I kind of put up with those pieces in a way. But
yeah,
definitely there was some proving there for sure. And I think, I went to law school in my last market because TV news was changing. I knew, with the internet starting, nobody was going to watch TV news anymore. So I went to law school at night and I graduated at the top of my class. And then I went into the entertainment law. And I just kept achieving, achieving, achieving. It's almost like I was trying to prove something to someone, maybe
yeah.
even prove it to myself. Um, but it took a long time to like unpack that achiever mentality, which I think does go back to your parents that say to you, work hard and you'll succeed. That's what my parents said, work hard, you'll succeed. So I just kept working harder, keep working harder,
Right,
and
right.
you'll succeed.
And so, having that narrative running in the background, working hard, right? I talk a lot about it's about working efficiently, right? Not working hard. So what, I think we all have a moment where we transitioned out of that, you know, working hard equals, achieving abundance, wealth, your dreams, etc. So, can you take us back? Like, when was that moment where you kind of had this realization that, this was the narrative that was instilled upon you that finally you realized, wait a second, it doesn't have to be like that?
Gosh, when was that? When did that hit me? It probably hit me not too long ago. I had a side coaching hustle for about 10 years. It was a six-figure business on the side of my corporate job. And at that point, I was already a coach. I was an executive coach internally. I was doing career coaching on the side. I was bringing in good money. I was working really hard. And they called everybody back to the office. And we had moved states during COVID. So I wasn't going back to the office. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to make this side hustle my full-time job. And I'm going to do executive coaching externally as well. And I went out on my own and I put myself right back on that treadmill, right back on it the second I got out. First of all, I started looking for a job because I was freaked out, right? It's the first time
Right.
ever, 30 years not working in corporate. But then I sat there and I'm like, no, no, you can do this. You've had a six-figure side hustle for years. You can build this. You can make this more. You'll be fine. And so I did. I started building the business. And when I was building it, I just kept putting myself back on the treadmill. Be busy, be busy, be busy, busy, be busy. And it took me a good year of hard work on myself to figure out, oh, all this busyness isn't what you need. It's actually being in tune with yourself and understanding yourself better and understanding your capacity and reframing a little bit of your past and what that was all about and trusting yourself and giving yourself agency that you know what you need. And then it just clicked. It just clicked. And I knew that I don't have to work this hard, and I don't.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? I mean, you have always
Excuse
been
me.
someone that I would like if someone asked me, well, there's so many words I would use to describe you, but I feel like the one that really stands out right now in a lot of the stories that you've shared is you are so resilient. Like you really are. And it's like my whole body is like getting chills, even just saying that. And I'm curious, if I were to ask you who you got that from, what's the first family member that would come to mind for you?
Oh, my father. Absolutely. My dad. I mean, my dad had an interesting background. He worked for his father in the silk industry, and then his father died suddenly. And my father's uncles, which were his father's brothers, right, also were partners in the company. And they basically told my father, in no uncertain terms, there was no place for him there anymore. And so he built a business from nothing. He didn't have an inheritance. He had two little kids. I think maybe we were like 3 and 5 at the time. We had a bed in the storeroom of his store that he was setting up. I remember. So I was teeny, maybe even 2 and 4. And I look back now and I realize that he had an idea and he had a will to figure it out. And he built a business, and his business was a bedspread and drapery store. And it was kind of like Tuesday Morning. Have you ever heard of like Tuesday Morning? I know you
Yeah,
know Bed Bath and Beyond. It was kind of a
yeah.
mixture of Tuesday Morning and Bed Bath and Beyond. It was like discounts and closeouts in the bedding and bath industry.
Hmm.
Long before the internet, by the way. So long before the Bed Bath and Beyond, long before you could buy this stuff online.
Hmm.
And I knew that story from the time I was really young. My dad told us that story over and over again. And I remember coming home from college one day, and I remember telling my father, we're sitting in the car, we're driving home from Newark. I lived in New Jersey. And I admitted that I was failing the history of France, the history of France. And why I was failing it was because the teacher was teaching it in French, even though it was an English course. Okay. So I had
Yeah.
like a D on the midterm, and I was failing. And I remember I was sitting in the car and I couldn't even look at my dad, and I'm looking out the front as he's driving, and he was clear, but he was super stern with me. And he said to me, and I will never forget these words. He said, "You know, there's a lot of books on the history of France in the library, and I'm sure you can learn it yourself. But if you choose not to, that's fine. But I won't be paying for you to retake it. I only pay for each credit once." That was it. No lecture,
Wow.
no disappointment speech, nothing. Just figure it out. And so I went to the library, I went back to school, I went to the library. I took out every possible book of the history of France. I had an entire table covered, like a table that would seat 8 to 10 people, covered in the history of France. And I created my own document on the history of France, took the exam, and I walked out of that class with an A minus. So I must have aced that baby. That's what I have to say.
Woohoo.
So, but I
I love
think
it.
that, like, when I think of resilience, right? Resilience is about figuring it out. It's about figuring out, and it's not like a moment in time, it's like a practice.
Yeah.
So I'm all about like being relentless, figuring it out, keep going, right? And then just picking yourself up. I mean, I've had things that have failed since then, lots of things that have failed. And I just keep going. You just keep going. You have to keep going. And you have to believe that, hey, maybe I'm too early on this, or maybe this isn't the right timing for this, or hey, I tried that and I really enjoyed working on that. And even though it didn't go great and nobody bought it or whatever the case may be, I enjoyed that. And so, I think picking yourself up is like step one, but then keep going is step
Yeah.
two.
Well, and so I mean, it's such a great example, and it so does not surprise me, just knowing you as well as I do, that that's what you did. So how do you translate that into the work that you're doing now? Like how you show up as a leader, not only for your clients, but for your girls too.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question because, you know, my girls, first of all, they are adopted. And so they did not inherit any DNA from me at all. And so everything I pass down to them and how I show up for them is a choice, right? And I can say I wasn't a great mom the first 7, 8 years. I didn't understand myself. I didn't understand my wiring in my brain. I didn't understand why I did what I did or how I did it. And I worked really hard to change that. And I did. But now I show up, I think for them, like it's okay to fail. It's okay to try new things. It's okay to just, just keep going. Just be okay. I mean, just this morning, I was telling you the story earlier. Just this morning, my daughter was driving. She was hyper focused on the music not playing. She's learning how to drive. And I said, okay, well, let's focus on the road. She's like, well, Mom, I can multitask. I'm like, heck no, you can't multitask, darling, while you're learning how to drive.
Yep.
So I saw it coming up to a curve and I said, hey, be careful that there's a tight here on the right, curb on the right. 2 seconds later, she hits it. We have a flat tire and she's melting down. And I looked at her and I said, honey, it's a great opportunity to learn how to call AAA, right? And she was
Absolutely.
super melting down. So I couldn't even get her to laugh at it. I couldn't even get her to do anything in that moment, but I told her I loved her and I said, that's what this is. This is learning. It's okay. You're not going to be perfect at this right away. And it is what it is. And $400 later, I have two new tires. But I think that's how I try to show up for them is that everything is learning. I have a mantra, and I know you know this mantra, is life is not about activities, achievements, and accolades. Life is about living, loving, and learning. And I fully believe that. Everything is about learning. And when I say learning, I don't mean learning what you read in a book or, learning how to change a tire. It's learning about yourself and learning what drives you and what motivates you and what excites you and what depletes you and just learning about your wiring and how you're wired and what you do and why you do what you do. So I think that's where I kind of bring my leadership from is, my whole self. It's what it is.
Yeah. I love that. It's such a beautiful story. And I feel like, you know, I was recently at an event. I was just telling you, I was at an event in Chicago, and one of the very successful entrepreneurs that was up on stage, made a comment and said how, he loves failing because he learns how not to do something. And,
Absolutely.
and I think that, a lot in what you just said really embodies that. And to everybody, everybody who's listening here, I also had asked Marlo a question on, sort of one of my intake forms, and I feel like it was so moving, probably the most moving answer that anyone yet has answered on that form with the question that
What
I
did I
want to ask
say?
it for you here. No, so it was, what Hebrew word or concept? You're smiling, so you remember. It's so
I
good.
do.
What Hebrew word or concept would you say acts as sort of like this compass for you? And I say that in not just business, but like in life and how you go about like making decisions, especially in those like high stake, high pressure, kid melting down, client having a crisis moment.
Yeah, the word is chazak. I think it's chazak if I say it right. It means strong or strengthen yourself. So whatever comes at you, no matter what, it just means you can handle it if you believe you can handle it. But you have to
Right,
believe it first.
right.
And that's really goes back to your resilience question, right? I said resilience isn't a moment, it's a practice. You show up, you adapt, you find your people, you
Yep,
pull others up with you as you rise.
yep,
And that shows up in everything I do, right? When I'm
yep.
talking to a client who is being sexually harassed, because I've had high level clients that have had to deal with this, or I'm talking to a client who is, looking for that next opportunity and comes in number two every time for a CEO role
Hmm.
or a CTO role, or I'm talking to a client who is just struggling with whatever's going on in their life, I just always think of that word chazak. I'm like, it's
Yeah,
about strengthening yourself in this moment. And it goes back to understanding yourself. What do I need in this moment to strengthen myself in this moment? And
yeah,
it might be a bath, right? It
right.
might be a walk. It might be just to be alone in your thoughts. It might be just sitting there in fetal position crying. It might be nothing. You might not need anything. But to be able to identify the thing that you need in that moment to continue to strengthen yourself, that's the key, is identifying it. And once you do, then you realize what's possible, right? I mean, I have spent my whole life just getting stronger from every failure or every bad thing that's happened or even when I didn't even realize that I needed to get stronger. I just kept trying to get stronger. So I love that word, hazak.
It's so good. And it reminds me of like that show. There's a show where it's like the Russian like huzzah that they say, like,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, when they're
I didn't even
toasting.
realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but it's like to me, and I bring that up because like to me, that's almost like it's a word that to me cheers you on.
Hmm.
It you know, I know that it's a word that's said at the end of a Torah portion, but it's sort of a way of, cheering yourself on in, not so many words, obviously. But I think that it's something really powerful. And I also think that a lot of times, and let me know how you feel about this, but I feel like, there's so many moments, even as we were growing up, where we witness strength in not so obvious ways of our family. And I'm curious, would you say that there's a piece of you that can recall or look back and see those Hazak moments in your family that you can recall that, perhaps even now you're like putting the dots together around?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when I look back and I think about my family, I mean, I look at my parents now and I'm like, wow, like they had a kid that was really sick, like really sick. And then they had another kid who was a motor mouth and would talk all the time and had a million questions and, with more energy than they knew what to do with. And I look back and they didn't have cell phones or microwaves or, any of the modern amenities that we have today. And I'm like, God, they did that and we both turned out okay, right? Like we both have jobs, we're both successful, we both are happy in our lives for the most part. Like, wow, that's pretty impressive if you think about it. I
Mhm.
think just them doing all that without the modern amenities, doing that without the knowledge. I don't even think they had the knowledge of themselves or knew how to learn about themselves either. So it's pretty impressive if you think about it. I don't know if there was a specific moment that I recognized my parents' strength. I mean, probably, I was too young to know when my dad had lost his job. But I do remember picking him up at the train station because he did go work in New York for a little while beforehand.
Mhm.
So I do remember that. And I remember him hating it. And I remember him wanting to start his own business and all of that. So if you think about him starting his own business from nothing, I think that's pretty huzzah, if you ask me. It's pretty
Absolutely.
strong of just saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it work with two young kids and a mortgage. Wow. Right? Most people don't
Yeah,
take the bold move, the bold jump.
right.
So,
So it's beautiful. And I'm curious to know, you work with so many high-powered, mostly CFOs, if I'm correct in saying
uh,
that.
all of them, CTOs, CFOs,
Yeah.
CMOs, general counsels,
C
CEOs,
all
C-suite,
C-suite.
all C-suite. Yeah.
Exactly. So you work with high-level C-suite clients.
Hmm.
And, talking about strength and courage and resilience, what's coming up and that I'm curious to know is, I think a lot of us place a lot of our value and our strength in our titles, right?
Oh,
We're
yeah.
striving for that CTO, CFO, I mean, we're CEOs of our own business. However,
Right.
I find that a lot of people, are striving, right, for that title that reflects to the world what it is that you've achieved, what it is that you
Hmm.
are doing. And I know you've been that version. Lord knows I've been that version myself as well. And I'm curious, you know, if you could go back and tell that version of yourself and or if there's something that you do share with your current clients who maybe are relying on their title for strength or, seeing themselves as having value, like what would you want to tell them now that you have learned, versus maybe, what you were doing at the time or what they're currently embodying?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would ask them is, are you happy? Which a lot of people will say, I'm content. That's what they
Yeah,
say, right? Not
right,
happy, content.
right.
And then I would ask them, are you fulfilled?
Mm,
Because nearly every single person says no.
mm,
And fulfillment is this level of peace. It's this level of,
mm.
this is going to sound so corny, but it's like this
No,
gloriousness of peace.
yeah.
And it is this happiness. It's more than happiness because it lasts longer.
Right.
And I would say if I could go back to my childhood, or if I could talk to me as a little kid, or I would say find the thing that you will be fulfilled doing. I think Gen Z has it right. Gen Z is looking for fulfillment. They're not just looking for a job or a title or money.
Right.
I think Gen X, which is where I am, I think we were told work hard, get a good job, make money, buy a house, do the things you're supposed to do.
Right.
And those things don't make you happy and they don't make you fulfilled if they're out of alignment with who you are and what you want. The
Right.
problem is when you ask people, what do you want? Most people have no idea what they want because they
Mhm.
don't know what will make them happy because they have not been living their life um, actively in their own lives, right? They're
Right.
passive in their
Yeah.
own lives. They're just kind of getting
Right.
through the day, getting through the week, getting through the month, getting through the next thing, getting through the next event, getting through the next holiday. They're not actively living every day. They're not present in their own
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
And I think being present in your own life, and I think finding that thing that will fulfill you, it exists. First of all, most people don't believe it exists. It exists. I can tell you it exists. I live it every single day. Hopefully, you can see that on my face, but I live it every single day. Not only does it exist, it is glorious once you get there. I never believed it existed because I was never given that vision that it existed.
Right.
And so I would tell that little girl, or I would tell, my clients today, I always say, it does exist, but it's going to be painful to get there, meaning you're going to have to do some of the hardest work of your entire life to understand what you want and what fulfills you and what gives you energy, the right energy, right? Not drains your energy, gives you the energy that makes you want to just soar and fly and feel glorious. And once you figure it out though, it's like you're standing on the top of Mount Everest. You're just standing there going, oh my God, I figured it out. And I can tell now in my own body instantly when I'm out of alignment, when something is out of alignment. And I'll give you like a stupid example. A friend calls me up and says, hey, let's go grab breakfast. And I say, great, I can't wait to see you. And I really am super excited to see them. And then it starts swirling in my head like, ooh, that's going to interrupt my morning routine. I really like my morning routine. I get up, I work out, I get the kids ready for whatever school, whatever camp, and then I sit in the infrared sauna for a half hour, and I either journal or I read a book, and then I come in and I shower, and then I do some writing. I write for HBR, I write for SHRM, I write for a bunch of places. I'm writing a memoir, and then I sit down and I start taking clients. I'm like, ooh, that's gonna interrupt my morning routine. I really like my morning routine. And then I start swirling on it, and I start swirling on it, and I start swirling on it. And then I go, huh, why don't I just ask them if they can do lunch? I call them back up and I say, hey, I really want to see you. Any chance you can do lunch? Oh, absolutely. We set up lunch. Guess what? Swirl gone instantly. That's how you know you're out of alignment. Whenever there's friction, whenever there's frustration, whenever there's something that just doesn't feel right, or, oh, I don't want to go to that party or whatever, you're out of alignment. You're not in alignment with who you are and what you want. And so if I could tell that little girl, every single thing you do in life, look for the alignment. Look for the energy that you're getting out of that. And if you don't want to do something, don't do it. Just don't do it. It's that simple. Can't tell you how many parties I belabored going to the party that I didn't want to go to, and I just wanted to be in my pajamas a million times, and then I'd get myself up and go like the last second. I just shouldn't have gone. I should have said, oh God, I'm really sorry. Thank you for the invite, but this is not something I'm interested in today. But thank you.
Yeah, but don't wouldn't you say, because like I can totally relate to that. And I grew up in a family where it was all about appearances.
Hmm.
And part of that was
Same here.
also ensuring, right? So ensuring that, you know, the way other people see you would then let you know exactly how you should see yourself. And so, I 100% can look at and go back and be like, oh God, this started with my grandmother. And I remember moments of my childhood where that came up, and it was something I had to not only realize I was doing, but to your point, like it does take work. And so I feel like there's almost like these invisible stories that we are passed from our family that we just automatically adopt as our own without even realizing that they were never ours to begin with. And so, how is it that you have been able to release those stories, and how have you noticed their impact once you've shifted
Oh, a lot of work, a lot of inner
it?
work.
Cheers, ditto.
Like I said, it's climbing Mount Everest, right? It's
Right.
a lot of inner work. I didn't just wake up one day and just release everything and say, I'm not going to believe that anymore. I mean, I think we're quite conditioned.
Sure.
Um, I mean, you said your grandmother specifically. I remember when my grandmother passed away and we went to her apartment to kind of clean it out a little bit. And I remember my dad was like, "Where's the picture I sent of our family? Like, where is it?" And he found it in the bottom of the closet. And my dad's immediate reaction was, "I guess we weren't good looking enough to be on the wall like everybody else."
Mm,
Right? Because we were the overweight family. And so, you get that from your parents, right? And you take that in and you are conditioned by it. And how you break that, and it is hard because you are breaking a cycle and you're breaking a belief, right? You're breaking a belief that has been ingrained in you since childhood. And how you break that is really understanding who you are, understanding, your wiring if you're neurodivergent in some way. It's understanding your past and reframing it through a different lens, having that multi-perspectivity on it where, maybe that didn't mean that. Maybe it meant something else, right? That's somebody
right.
else's perspective on it.
Right.
We were all about appearances as kids. We had to wear the nicest clothes, when we went to synagogue because everybody was there during the high holidays. And so, you had to show up, dressed up.
Always.
But I'll be
I
honest
got
with
like a
you.
new outfit every year.
Oh,
I don't know
every
if you did the
year.
same, right?
Of
Yeah.
course, of course. But now I don't know if it's age combined with all the work that I've done on myself, but it's also, it's just understanding who you are. Like I would love some days. I look at Paris Hilton and I'm like, wow, look at her all dressed up. Like that is something to have that much to walk around and feel confident and dressed up like that. I'm never going to be her. I shop at Target, Costco, and Kohl's. Like it's just never going to happen, right? And I've accepted that about myself that I am a Target, Costco, and Kohl's girl. And so, and I don't shop for myself at all, really. I shop for the kids and things like that. But you just have to understand, like, you don't have to be anyone else. You just have to be you, but you have to understand what the authentic you is. And if you've been conditioned for a long time to believe that the authentic you is then you have to really look at it and say, does that feel right for me? Is that really me? Or is that somebody else's impression of me? I can tell you, I think also age, once you hit your 50s, you really don't care what other people think. I
Right.
don't. You and I were supposed to record this a week earlier, and I got online. I said, Wendy, I am so sorry. I thought we were just catching up. I didn't realize that this was this recording. My voice sounds like a frog because I was had a really bad cold. I said, do you mind if we record next week? You know what I did right before that, though? Right before I said that to you? Guess what I did?
What did you
I
do?
pop up in my screen. I said, "Oh my God." And I ran to my bedroom and I started to put on makeup. And I said, "You know something? No, no, you're not ready for this today. No." And I told you exactly what was coming up for me and we rescheduled. And that's what it is. It's living authentically and unapologetically.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how comfortable you are in your own skin, irregardless of, you know, how the world is operating around you. And I know that that came with a lot of hard work. And I know that, there are pieces of our family that, you get to carry the torch forward. I'm curious what one of those things is for you.
One of the things I carry forward, well, I've done a lot of work unraveling things, right? So I think one of the biggest things for me is money. I've always had trouble with money, meaning not spending it, meaning I won't spend it. I make it, but then I don't do anything with it. And, money is this super powerful thing, and it's had this hold on me for a very long time. And I've had absolutely, there's times where I've had nothing, where I've gone through 10 rounds of IVF and we blew through entire savings and could barely afford our rent. And I've had times where I've had a lot of it. But either way, I just kept telling myself over and over again that the responsible thing to do is to save. The responsible thing is to do is to not spend. Spending is a risk, right? We want to be secure. You want to be secure. And so I spent a lot of time just unraveling that to not carry that forward with my kids.
Mhm.
Um, there was never a specific amount. Like I was never trying to save a specific amount or do anything like that, but I just had this thing where I would not spend. And then finally, I decided that I was going to take a bike ride. This was, God, when was this? This was probably 18 or so years ago. I saw this Backroads brochure. Do you know what Backroads is? It's this bike
Mm-mm.
touring company.
Okay.
And I loved bike riding from the time I was a little kid. And so I was like, I want to go on this trip. I want to go on a bike trip. And I want to do it big. I want to do a bike trip from Prague to Vienna. And so
Oh my
I had
goodness.
saved all this money and I was saving. I was a good saver and I had not spent on anything. And I remember telling my parents about it and they were like, "Ooh, that's really pricey. Are you sure you want to do that?" And I remember looking at my parents. I was sitting at home and looking at my parents and they were sitting on the couch. And they were quite frankly looking old and fragile. And they were just sitting there. They weren't doing much. And I just kind of looked at them and I'm like, they never traveled. They rarely ate out. They retired at 50. They did nothing, absolutely nothing. And I thought, I can't do that. I gotta live. I gotta live now. I gotta do this. And of course, I hemmed and hawed.
Of
And then
course.
impulsively one night, I just booked it. I just booked it, and it was non-refundable. And they tried to talk me out of it, and I was like, nope, I'm going. And this was a time before cell phones, right? So I didn't have a cell phone when I was in Europe. I'd been to London on like a class trip, but I had never like been throughout Europe, especially on a bike in the middle of nowhere, right? Riding through little towns and stuff. And I remember, I will always remember, and I always pulling up my hands right now, like I'm holding the bike, and I was sitting there, and I'm riding along, and I'm going, I'm riding along the Danube. Look at me, right? And I just remember
So
thinking to
amazing.
myself, this is living. This is
Yes.
living. And I had confused most of my life security for living. I had confused it.
Hmm.
And I now measure all of my life in experiences, not in things. You'll never find me carrying a, Gucci purse. I just won't. It's not my thing. No, no, no shame to anybody who does. All goodness,
I'm
right?
like, that would be me.
But yeah, that's okay. If that makes you
And
happy,
I
great for
take no
you.
offense. Yeah, it
Again,
works
that's
for
you.
me. Yep.
But now I look at everything as an experience, and this is what I'm carrying forward with my children. So
Yeah.
2 years ago, we went on a 6 week trip to Europe. We went 6 weeks, and that took everything in my being to book that. Not, I didn't actually book it. I had a travel agent do it, but I mean to spend the money on it, right?
Right.
Um, and this year, we just got back from Japan. We spent 2 weeks in Japan. And we do the little things as well, right? We do the little things like we go tubing down the Salt River, we rent a boat, we go tubing on Lake Pleasant. But I believe that we have to live and I have to give my kids experiences because I feel like, yes, my parents gave us experiences, but their experiences where we go to the Caribbean for 2 weeks, we sit on a lounge chair. That's what we do. We sit on a lounge chair. And don't get me wrong, I go to Cancun every year for 2 weeks. I sit on a lounge chair, but I need to give my kids other experiences besides just sitting around. Like I want them to understand there's a big world out there, there's a big life out there, there's other cultures out there, and I want them to see it. And don't get me wrong, I still wrestle spending money. I absolutely do. But I remind myself every time, I'm going to go back to my mantra one more time. Life is not about activities, achievements, and accolades. Life is about living, loving, and learning. And the living part for me is where I spend the money.
Yep.
That's what it is for me. So whenever I say to myself, okay, I'm getting a little skittish. Ooh, I don't want to eat out. It's going to cost us like 120 something dollars for 4 people. I always say to myself,
Yep.
nope, nope. Eating out tonight is an experience. We're going to have an experience at this new restaurant or whatever.
I
And
love that.
that's what I'm carrying forward with them is I want them to save. Yes, I think saving is important. I still save, but living is just as important.
I love that. That's so beautiful. Okay, so are you ready to have some fun? Not that we
Sure.
haven't been, but just in a different format.
Sure.
I'm doing some rapid fire questions.
Ooh,
So I want you to say the first thing that
okay.
comes to mind, and we'll do a couple of those and then we'll close this out. How does that sound?
Okay, go bring it.
Okay, so what did your grandmother or grandparents, Bubby, whatever you called them, what did they make better? Matzo ball soup or brisket?
Neither. They did not
Neither.
cook.
They
They were
did
not
not
cooks.
cook.
My grandmother in Florida may have cooked. I don't know. She was pretty far away. My
Okay.
grandmother in New Jersey, excuse me, she did not cook that I'm aware
Okay. Okay. Which do you make better?
of. Excuse me, I'm still getting over this cold. I make great matzo ball soup, and I'm still tweaking my recipe. But I think the last one I made for Passover, I think, was the best I've ever made. I'm getting
I
really
love
good at it.
it.
It's my mom's recipe.
I love it.
The key to that, in case you're wondering, when you take the matzo ball mix, is don't put it in the fridge for a half hour, put it in for like 2 hours.
Yep.
And right, and then you
Yep.
make all the stock and everything by itself. But if
Yep.
you're going to add other things to the stock, don't add it till after you've cooked the matzo balls. That's like my trick now. That's my big,
Yep. Yep. That's awesome.
yeah.
That's my grandmother. I remember watching her and helping her make
Hmm.
those. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay. Where do you do your best thinking? Is it walking outside? Is it in the shower? Where's the spot?
Two places, in the shower and in the sauna. We have an infrared sauna. So in the sauna, I do great thinking, but in the shower mostly, and I'm usually talking to myself and thinking.
Yeah.
So I actually have a little notepad in there that's
That's awesome.
waterproof.
I love it. Okay. Oh my God, Marlo, I
Either
love
that or I'm
you.
repeating things in my head like 12 times, like the seven things that I thought of. I'm
Right.
like, don't forget, don't
Don't
forget, don't
forget, don't
forget, as I'm
forget.
walking out dripping wet, like trying to write it
Right.
down. Yeah.
Right. I love it. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Absolute morning person. I
Yep.
am up at 5:30 in the morning to work out every single day.
I love it.
I am not up past 8:30. Don't call me. I will not
I
answer the
love
phone.
it. What is the number one value you run your business on?
I think it goes back to Chazak. Just be strong and make good decisions and
Love it.
believe in yourself. That's it.
Beautiful.
And do good work for your clients. Just be present for them. That's what it's about.
I love it. Marlo, thank you so much for being here with me today. This was such a beautiful, we got to have like such a different conversation. It was really, thank you so much for sharing yourself so vulnerably. And I would love for everyone to know where it is that they can find you.
Yes, they can go to my website, www.marlolyonscoaching. It's Lyons, marlolyonscoaching.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the usual places. My podcast is Work Unscripted. Feel free to save, download, subscribe, all that jazz. And feel free to reach out.
Amazing. Marlo, thank you so much. You guys, thank you for tuning into today's episode. This was one of the 18 conversations that I'm having with amazing, powerful Jewish women around how it is that they lead and how their Jewish heritage has shaped how they grew up, what they've learned, what they've had to unlearn, what we've moved through to get to the level of success that each of us has gotten to. And I hope that each of you listening knows that you're not alone. This is something that we have all experienced in our own unique ways, that ultimately, at the end of the day, I think we all just want to be known and seen for who it is that we authentically are. Thank you so much for tuning in again today to the Decisive Edge, where ancient roots are creating modern power. I will see you guys next time. Thank you. Mwah. Sending love and light. I'll see you guys soon.